The great temples and monuments of ancient Egypt continue to fascinate and amaze people in the modern day. The sheer size and scope of structures like the Great Pyramid at Giza or the Temple of Amun at Karnak, or the Colossi of Memnon are awe-inspiring and naturally encourage questions regarding how they were built. All over the Egyptian landscape are immense ancient structures. There are many different theories about how they were built, but one thing is clear: they've survived for thousands of years, while several significant questions remain unanswered. The simplest explanation for many can be found in ancient Egyptian inscriptions, texts, wall paintings, tomb inscriptions, art, and artifacts. The ancient Egyptians had an excellent command of science and technology. The ancient Egyptians were gifted with some pretty remarkable innovations other civilizations would take for granted nowadays. They created paper and ink, cosmetics, toothbrushes and toothpaste, even the ancestor of our modern breath mint. Not only that, but they left us some incredible monuments too. It has been said that they have improved our lives in just about every area. They are credited with advances in the manufacturing of simple household goods, beer brewing, engineering and construction, agriculture, architecture, medicine, and astronomy. Their influence on art and literature can't be overstated either, even though they didn't understand the wheel until the Hyksos arrived during Egypt's Second Intermediate Period. Their technical skills are evident as early as pre-dynastic Egypt. The construction of tombs, artwork, and other notable structures reveals a high level of sophistication in both construction and engineering. The civilization became more advanced as they learned more and their skill increased. Eventually, by the time the Ptolemaic dynasty ruled Egypt, they had created one of the most unique cultures in the ancient world. In today's video, we will look at some of these fantastic triumphs in engineering, architecture, and medicine that the ancient Egyptians created. Egyptians are noted to be a conservative society with different ways of accomplishing tasks. They have a conservative heritage, which can be seen in their construction of pyramids and other monuments. The creation of an obelisk, for example, seems to have always involved the same procedure performed precisely. The quarrying and transport of obelisks are well documented and show strict adherence to a standard procedure. In Djoser's step pyramid, Imhotep was successful in applying his ideas about how pyramids should be built, and Sneferu violated those rules when it came to medium. Sneferu veering away from Imhotep's plan caused this project to fail, and the structure was coined the collapsed pyramid. Sneferu returned to Imhotep's original engineering plans for his next projects and was able to create his bent pyramid and red pyramid at Dashur, advancing the art of pyramid building, which is epitomized in the Great Pyramid at Giza. The technological skill required to build the Great Pyramid still mystifies scholars in the present day. Egyptologists Bob Breyer and Hoyt Hobbs comment on this. Because of their immense size, building pyramids pose special problems of both organization and engineering. For example, constructing the Great Pyramid of the Pharaoh Khufu required that more than 2 million blocks weighing from 2 to more than 60 tons be formed into a structure covering 2 football fields and rising in a perfect pyramidal shape 480 feet into the sky. Its construction involved vast numbers of workers which, in turn, presented complex logistical problems concerning food, shelter, and organization. Millions of heavy stone blocks needed not only to be quarried and raised to great heights but also set together with precision in order to create the desired shape. The vizier would delegate tasks to representatives who would continue this process until a ruler could be found. The Old Kingdom of Egypt had strict bureaucracy when it came to building anything, which set the standard for architecture in Egypt for centuries afterward. For example, builders were required to document everything about their project, and if they deviated from the plan at any point. Later in the Old Kingdom, Weni, known as the Governor of the South, would leave an inscription detailing how he traveled to Elephantine to source granite for a false door needed to build a pyramid and dug 5 canals for towboats to bring supplies for further construction. Records such as Weni's show the immense amount of effort required in building the monuments one finds in Egypt today. There are many records of supplies and difficulties in constructing pyramids, but there is no one clear explanation of how they were made. The most popular theory involves ramps which were constructed as the pyramid was raised, but this is actually untenable as Breyer and Hobbs state. The problem is one of physics. The steeper the angle of an incline, the more effort necessary to move an object up that incline. So, in order for a relatively small number of men, say 10 or so, to drag a 2-ton load up a ramp, its angle could not be more than about 8%. Geometry tells us that to reach a height of 480 feet, an inclined plane rising at 8% would have to start almost 1 mile from its finish. It has been calculated that building a mile-long ramp that rose as high as the Great Pyramid would require as much material as that needed for the pyramid itself, workers would have had to build 2 pyramids in the 20-year time frame. However, a modification of the ramp theory was proposed by the French architect Jean-Pierre Houdin, who claims ramps were used on the inside of the pyramid, not the exterior. Initial construction may have used portable ramps outside to help raise quarried stones up to the level of the entrance. The spears would then have been moved inside and carried up ramps into their final positions. Houdin claims this would account for the shafts one finds inside the pyramid. This theory, however, does not account for the weight of the stones or the number of workers on the ramp required to move them up an angle inside the pyramid. There are even other theories that suspect that they used water power to build the pyramids. They may have done this by using water pumps, since water levels back then were much higher than we see now in Egypt. Whatever you think of the water theory concerning the pyramids, Egyptian society did depend on a reliable supply of clean water for their crops and livestock. Ancient Egypt was an agricultural society. As a result, they invented innovations to help cultivate the land. One of the many inventions and innovations of ancient Egyptians was the ox-drawn plow and improvements in irrigation. The ox-drawn plow was designed in 2 gauges, heavy and light. The heavy plow went first and cut the furrows, while the lighter plow came behind, turning up the earth. Once the field was plowed, workers with hoes broke up the clumps of soil and sowed the rows with seeds. The seeds were then laid into furrows, and livestock was driven across the field to close it. However, all of this work would have been for nothing if the seedlings lacked sufficient water, showing that regular irrigation was pivotal to their farming success. Egyptian irrigation techniques were so successful that they were implemented by cultures around the world. It has been noted that Greek philosopher Thales of Malta studied in Egypt and may have brought these innovations to Greece with him. New irrigation techniques were introduced in the Second Intermediate Period and were introduced by the people known as the Hyksos, who settled in Avaris, Lower Egypt. They improved their irrigation techniques in new ways, such as building canals, which is how Egyptians succeeded with them. The yearly overflowing of the Nile River has enriched the valley's soil and therefore led to a higher standard of living. Irrigation canals were necessary, so outlying farms and villages could be irrigated and maintain even saturation throughout the land. The ancient Egyptians had great success with the land on Earth, but how about the cosmos? Astronomy was important to the ancient Egyptians on 2 levels, the spiritual and the practical. Egypt was thought to be a perfect reflection of the land of the gods in the afterlife, a mirror image of one's life on Earth. This duality is apparent in Egyptian culture in every aspect and epitomized in the obelisk, which was always raised in pairs and believed to reflect a divine pair appearing at the same time in the heavens. The stars told the stories of the gods' accomplishments and trials, but also indicated the passage of time and the seasons. On a more practical level, the stars could tell one when to harvest crops or when to make important decisions like building or starting a business. They were even able to tell you if it was about to rain near your location. Astronomical observations led to astrological interpretations, which may have been adopted from Mesopotamian sources via trade. Strictly astronomical observations of the night sky, however, were interpreted in a pragmatic way and recorded in mathematical calculations that measure weeks, months, and years. The calendar was invented by the ancient Sumerians, but it is more than just a concept. It is one of the most important ways people organize their lives daily. According to many Egyptologists, mathematics in Egypt was entirely practical. Rosalie David, for example, claims mathematics served basically utilitarian purposes in Egypt and does not seem to have been regarded as a theoretical science. And mathematics was not abstract but practical. The Egyptians practiced a form of geometry that was identical to the ancient Greek method. Conic sections are used in pyramids, obelisks, and many other constructions. In Egypt during the Old Kingdom, geometry was studied mainly for 2 purposes: pyramid construction, which required a rigorous knowledge of geometry, and the concept of a place. The ancient Egyptians were interested in determining where their cities were built and how that might be done using geometry. One method to determine the location of a city is to find its geometric center, which would be at a point with coordinates x, y such that x2 plus y2 equals 1. Along with the Egyptians' strong grasp of mathematics, they were also able to pioneer the fields of medicine and dentistry. Their medicine was so advanced at the time they believed it to be magic. One of the most recognized bodies of work in medicine is called the Ebers Papyrus, containing 110 pages of treatments for different illnesses such as gastrointestinal distress, depression, heart disease, and cancer. There are also 2 more medical works created by the ancient Egyptians, the Edwin Smith and London Medical Papyrus. Of course, these were named after the individual or institutions who discovered them, but they went over surgical techniques aimed at triage. Also, these texts combined what they considered magical spells and practical medical expertise that ranged from ailments of the eye to miscarriages. They even had a love potion or spell recipe that utilized aphrodisiacs and pheromone perfumes. The scope of ancient Egyptian discovery is deep. We are continually discovering and deciphering how the ancient civilization operated. Looking at all this information, although it may seem like a distant past to us, they were faced with problems that we still are figuring out today, like curing cancer and understanding love. I hope that we continue to research ancient civilizations because there might be deep insights into life that could help modern civilization. Thanks everyone for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a comment and like. I would love to hear your suggestions. Until next time, folks.